Hi, and welcome to the mental health madness that is the Man Myth Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Bobby,
And I'm the other host, Pop.
and we are going over Stoicism Part Dos today.
Exactly. So I think we outlined it fairly well last time. I don't think, for me, when I first went through of course, I've been studying this for a while. So when I first thought of it, I thought, they've used the term stoic or don't be stoic or you're too stoic. But that's just a little piece of the puzzle that is stoicism. And some of the stuff I really like, some of the stuff I kind of disagree with. And we'll talk a little bit about that. We're going to go over the last 6 rules. We went over the first 6 in part 1, so we'll go over that. Last 7, and then put our brilliance on it,
As always,
as we see it, as we feel called. So let's go ahead and start with rule number 7, and it's constantly ask: is this necessary?
Oh, I like that one.
And Marcus Aurelius says, ask yourself at every moment, is this necessary? So it's a little bit different. Some of the rules have been changed to protect the guilty or innocent. I'm not sure, but it does make it. And I was just on a call with a person about decluttering, and I think that's part of what this is. And during the chat with this person, I was talking about, if I have 30 pairs of shoes, I don't need 30 pairs of shoes. But
one for every day of the month.
If I have one pair, if I need that, then what are the other 29 pairs? And are they really as important? What are they doing for me? And it could be that they are, right? Like you said, it could be I have to have a different pair of shoes every day. But in asking, is this important? I think it goes even deeper into just the whole process of what we put ourselves through.
Right.
And how to limit that a little bit or take a little bit of the pressure off. Was that on your side or my side?
Did it sound like a knife dropping?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my side.
Awesome.
That's what happens when you go live. Yeah, I like is this necessary, because I was thinking more of not decluttering, or like you said, like I know shoes was just an example, but I was thinking of like when people get mad at something, I always kind of go back to traffic.
Mm-hmm.
You have these people, everyone's sitting in traffic, but there's like 6 people that are honking and trying to go around people and trying to zip through the lanes. And I'm always like, you realize, like, there's nowhere to go. It's just more traffic.
Right.
That's all that's up there. So I always just think, like, is this necessary? Like, is this helping you at all? Like, is this giving you any sort of and maybe they're releasing their frustration, but it's just one of those things that so much of our reactions and feelings we should think, is this necessary?
Right. And that person or the persons that are doing that are usually the ones that at the next light you catch up with.
Yeah.
Right. And then you just look over and smile and honk your horn. But yeah, I mean, it's like, what is important at that moment? Is it really that important? Like I remember, and this came up one time. I was listening to a video years ago at Granny and Papa's, and we were playing it back, and I was doing something. I was ironing something, and I hear this little Bobby voice, Dad, 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 and I was like, that's what made me think of this, was what I was doing at that point really more important than listening to what you had to say.
Right.
It didn't matter what it was. Right. I think that puts a little, for me, it made it more personal.
Right.
And it was like, how could I let this little cool dude ask Dad that many times and me just be off someplace else, ironing clothes or trying to be important, whatever it was.
Well, in your defense, I probably said dad 17 times in a second before you even had a chance for your brain to register.
But when I look back at, or I remember watching that over again, I felt it really made me feel sad. I was like, why didn't I just? What was important in that moment was connecting with you, and I think
Right.
that's something you really do well with your kids.
I try. Sometimes it's hard.
Oh, yeah,
Like,
there's gonna be times, right?
I mean, there's only so many times a kid can show you how fast they can run from the couch to the wall
Right.
before you're like, okay,
Yeah,
good
good.
job. I'm watching, I
That was
promise.
faster.
But yeah. Grayson, you remember Grayson in the basement at the old house?
It's
Dad,
just
record how fast I go this time. And I'm just
can't,
like, okay. Like,
and he didn't run any faster. He just pumped his arms
yeah.
faster.
No, his legs did not go any faster. Just
But that's the important. That
yeah.
moment creates that importance, and those are the things I think for me. You know, that's the set is it necessary?
Well,
What I'm doing now, is it necessary, or will I have more memory or more joy from the next thing?
right. Well, I get a little, and I wouldn't say aggravated. I get aggravated because all the kids play. Well, Grayson and Xander play sports,
Mm-hmm.
and you'll see other parents that are like on their phones or watching watching the game or doing something, and their kids playing a sport in front of them, and they're not even really paying attention. And that's one thing I try not to get on my phone unless I'm like taking a video of him or taking a picture so I can have like a good action shot of him or whatever. I
Right.
try not to be on my phone. I'm not going to be texting on my phone, but I just it really frustrates me to see that because these parents then when everybody else starts cheering, then they put their phones down and start cheering, and they're like, "Oh, is that my kid?" Like, yeah,
Right.
your kid just scored a goal and you were looking at your phone. Like it's the same thing. It's what's important in that moment. It should be your child.
Yeah, and I think that's where I went with that.
Mm-hmm.
Is it necessary? What am I doing right now? The most necessary thing for me to be doing.
All right. Rule 8.
Rule 8. Rule 8 is rhymes. Rule 8 is love your fate.
Rule 8. Love your fate. I don't know if I love mine right now, so I'm not being very stoic, but we'll see. I mean, it's a little early. I'm only 37. We'll see what fate has in store, right?
Right. And I think that's just what they're saying, is just see the silver lining in everything. See the positive in things. And I think it's tough to do because we're not trained that way. We're trained to see the negative or the lesser things, sometimes to try to fix them, but often we're also trained to belittle them or make fun of them.
Mm-hmm.
Not so much with us, but with other
Right.
people.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
loving your fate in that case wouldn't be seeing how much better you have it than somebody else. It's seeing what you can gain, where the growth is. Like we talked just with Sam about, which way is that trauma going to take you? Is it going to take you
Right.
into hero or victim? It can go either way. And that's really what this is. What is your fate?
Mm-hmm.
What are you going to do with it? What can it do? Can it motivate you to be better or to be more connected to the time?
Right. And I think, I forget who it is, but there's a famous comic book guy. I want to say it was Stan Lee, but it probably wasn't. But he said heroes and villains almost always have the same origin story.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's something tragic that happened in their past that made them the way they are and made them act the way they do.
Mm-hmm.
But it just depends on that person and how they handle it. Sometimes, like the Joker turned his back on society and the world, Batman said, well, I don't want this to happen to anybody else, so I'm going to protect. So it's just, it could have been flip-flopped, and Joker could have been a good guy and Batman could have been a bad guy, but it's just the different paths they took.
That's true. The next one is number 9 is kind of an interesting one. And this is one that I kind of went back and forth with because I do a lot of spiritual work and I do shamanic work. So it did mean a little bit different to me, but it also has the same meaning throughout. It just depends on your belief system. And that's speak with the dead.
No, I've seen Ghost Adventures. I don't need to do that.
What they're talking about with that is learn from the masters, read books, learn the lessons from the people that have already passed.
That makes more sense. That's much less scary. That's much less scary.
Yeah, but the funny thing is when you do spiritual work and energy work, you actually can go back and work with those people. Now it's not that much different. One's written and one's, some people say imaginary, some people say spiritual connection, whatever. But there is a process of where we can learn from the things that have happened in the past.
Right.
Not politicians. They won't do that. But
especially modern day politicians.
regular people. But it was funny when I first heard that. I was like, heck yeah, let's talk to the dead. And then it was like, oh yeah, books.
Oh, the books. This is bullshit.
That's the easier way to do it. I guess I went on the more difficult way to do it.
Yeah, but yours is way more fun, I'm sure.
It is. It's more interesting. But yeah, that's like if you wanted to become an author and you read Hemingway and Twain and those kind of things, that would give you an idea about what people were looking for, what the energy was in the books or how they wrote, that kind of thing. So instead of having to reinvent the wheel, you can go through and use those people as teachers or mentors, even though they're not with us any longer.
Right.
On this plane.
Here we go.
So the 10, I think this is one that when we first talked about Stoicism and how the different definitions, this is one of those that is also the same. It says, be tough on yourself and understanding to others.
Right.
And I think when I first read that, I was like, be unfair to yourself, but more fair to others. If I change the wording around in some of the times, and then I just like, nope, that's not what they're talking about.
Right.
Because it's too, in essence, negative. But be tough on yourself is be honest. And understand when others aren't able to be honest.
Right. Yeah, and that makes a lot more sense. But I think, I don't know if, I'm sure we've gone over this, but I think we kind of do that anyway, because we are a lot of times our own worst critics and let other people get away with too much. But I don't think that's what this is talking about. I think this is talking about, like you said, being honest with yourself about, you can't be too lenient with yourself and just be like, oh, okay, whatever, and then expect other people to be a higher level, like expect more from other people than you do yourself. But you should never expect as much from anybody else as you do yourself. And
that's the Marcus Aurelius was, be tolerant with others and strict with yourself. So it's a little bit different than a Western version of it. But it's also one of those things where we don't give ourselves, a lot of times, we see the goodness in others more than we see it in ourselves. And I think that's kind of, but it is, if you're strict with yourself, you're doing things, there's going to be a certain honesty that you're going to be living with that's going to make you a better person. So I think that's a big thing to look at. This is this is a repetitive one from I think some others, is turn obstacles upside down. And I think that goes with a lot, like I said, goes a lot with the other ones, is when you see something that is an obstacle, what it becomes something that you can use to be productive. And I think that's part of like some of these kind of revisit the same things. So when they're, if that would be the, what do you tolerate? What irritates you can actually motivate you. Those kind of things. If that makes sense.
You have to, but you can't have 11. So you kind of sneak one in there that says something the other one. Like 11 principles doesn't roll off the tongue.
Or he knew that people weren't very smart, so he just kept repeating it in different ways so they could understand it.
Hammer it into
Right.
They won't understand the first time. We'll get the second time.
Right. And then, actually, it would be 11 if they did, but this is 12. This is the last one. And it says, remember every day you're dying.
True story. I remember that every day I wake up and my whole back hurts.
Slowly dying.
Just slow and steady.
So the Seneca quote is, this is our big mistake, to think we look forward toward death. Most death is already done or gone. And whatever time has passed is owned by death.
That I like that. Because you can't, you can't go back. So death does, in a certain way, death does own that because it's in the past. Like, you can't go back and fix it. But if you realize, okay, well, I can't fix it before, but going forward, I can make sure I learn from it, then it won't be repeating.
Well, that's like, I think I mentioned this before when Megan had said, when we were talking in like 62, and she says, just think where you were. She says, you'll probably live another 40 years. And I'm like, well, maybe. She says, but look back where you were 40 years ago, or even 30.
Right.
And how much I've done since then. And if I had that to do again, do I just sit there and wait to die and let death control my life? Or do I actually go and live it?
Right.
And even though I've lost the fear of death, it also can be a place where it doesn't, that you have to have that in your life, the understanding of that, to put not an urgency, to put a value on what you're doing right now, if that makes sense.
Right. No, it does make sense.
And that's the living part.
Right. Did you see Jelly Roll's acceptance speech for his Best New Artist for the CMAs? My favorite line from that, this is probably my favorite line from any acceptance speech ever. But he says, there's a reason the windshield's bigger than the rearview mirror. And so many people act like they're looking, their rearview mirror is the same size as their windshield. And it's just, there's so much ahead of you. Like you said, think of where I was, I'll do 15 years ago. I was 22. And then think of where I'll be when I'm 42 in another 15 years. No, 52. Sorry. I don't know how old I am.
Probably a math teacher.
52.
I want to say so you're going to be a math teacher.
But just like thinking about where I could be in the next 15 years is something that, like, I have no clue what I'm going to be doing.
Yeah. And that quote, this is a teardrop moment. A teardrop putter moment.
Oh, jeez. Do we have to bring that up now?
But I've said that before.
Yeah.
Like, you cannot drive forward looking at the rearview mirror. It's just not healthy. But you take somebody like him that's popular right now in his moment,
right?
Then more ears hear it. Same thing with our podcast. We need to get more ears hearing it, right?
Yeah, because people would fucking share it.
Well, they're going to, because I asked them to this time.
Well, I've been asking every time.
We'll get there. But that's part of the narrative of today. And if you think about how the world's changed, like a speech from Lincoln, President Lincoln, right? He was probably in front of.
We were talking about the car manufacturer.
That was probably 300 people,
right?
And then it was spread out to different people, and now we have President Biden, and there's millions of people listening to this at some point, but that's it. It just takes that thing that makes somebody popular. And
Right.
it doesn't mean that somebody worked harder. It doesn't mean it's just like at the right place at the right time. It's also getting to know the home ups. I've heard there a ton of people have talked about how the windshield's bigger than the rearview mirror and all this.
Right.
I've heard it many
Well,
times.
I'm sure it wasn't like, I'm not trying to say that, but that was the passion and the just way he talked about it. Was almost, maybe this is a little self-centered maybe, but it was almost like he was talking to me, because he's 39.
Mm-hmm.
He's been working at this for, I mean, longer than I've been working at doing a podcast or comedy. But he's
Mm-hmm.
like, you never know when it's going to be your time.
Right.
And I always feel like, oh, I'm 37. I started so late at everything. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even when I got into doing elevators, I was 8 years older than some of the guys that were in my class, because they
Mm-hmm.
got in right out of high school. And I'm just like, okay, well, like, what's next? And I have to stop worrying about, well, oh, I should have started comedy 10 years ago, or this, that, and the other thing. I just have to accept where I am and keep working towards the goals I have now, and not worry about before.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very personal, like, touching thing to me.
And that's what I was talking about, because it reached probably millions of people. And it's the same thing in sales. The more no's you hear, the more yeses you're going to hear.
Right. And
It's getting through that.
right. Just real quick, Jelly Roll did not personally touch me. His speech touched my heart. There was no accusations. Okay.
Oh, by the way,
There's going to be I'm going to find a sound bite of this. It touched me personally. Jelly Roll touched me personally.
well, and that's part of it. It's love your fate, right?
Right.
Is number 8, but that's the same. I didn't go to chiropractic college until 31,
Right.
and I know people that started when they were in their 20s. But I did 12 years in the Air Force, and all those things have made me who I am today. Some people like it, some people don't.
Oh.
But my level of concern about that is much less.
You can hop on or fuck off. Either one's fine with me. I do not care. But in that same nerve, it makes it easier for me not to look in the rearview mirror and not like regret not starting these things earlier, because of, and this is going to sound sappy and silly, but that's just who I am. But because of the family I have, like, if I had started this earlier, who knows if I would have had kids when I did, or had, met Ash, or all these different things. And I love my family. Everybody who knows me knows I like my family more than any other person.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I would rather be in this house with them than anywhere else without them. And so it's come at the perfect time for me to be, I have this family, I have stability, I have a good job where I can take, and I can do this, and I can afford to, I have time. So it's happened when it was supposed to happen for me. It wasn't supposed to happen any earlier or any later. It's happened now. So that's what we're going to do, and we're going to keep pushing forward, and we're doing it.
Well, that's the thing too, is think about all the comedians that have committed suicide or doing things that, like all the stuff that they've done, they've had success, but what about their families?
Right.
So they could be looking at you going, man, I wish I'd have followed that path. I mean, it's being you is the best thing.
Right.
I don't mean being Bobby, although that's awesome, but being yourself,
to every person, being
right.
you,
and being in relationships or friendships, whatever it is that you can be, that is. And I just got off another call with this. It's and letting, in that situation, letting other people be who they are, and that's where the relationships come from. And I think that's why, just how you kind of let your kids be themselves, with a little, like the bowling, when they have the bumper bowling.
Yeah, you have to have a little bit of
you just have a little bit of it, but they can still throw the ball down, right?
Right.
And I think that it is one of the coolest things for me as a dad of your dad as to witness is like because you know how my dad was with me,
Right.
and I am with you, and you are with your kids. It just keeps, in my opinion, it just keeps getting better.
I hope so. I always tell the kids, I'm like, I wish you could go back in time and see Pop before before he was Pop. And not that you're bad or anything, but you were very much more strict, I feel like, when I was younger, and you were a little more harder on me, which I needed. Obviously, I was not the best kid, but you were far cry from your father, even at at any moment in your life. You were a far cry from him.
But that's I think that's what we needed. That's evolution to me, not all the things that they talk about. But as if we, and not just as fathers and men, but as people, when we can be ourselves and let other people be themselves, and just let it go, and see the beauty in the differences and in the things that make us us, and not point those things out, right? Like you were bullied as a kid because in essence you were, in my opinion, a little bit too cool for them. They just didn't know
it. Yeah, I wish that was true. I'm gonna say that's why. I got bullied. A lot of it had I appreciate that, but a lot of it had to do with I didn't know my own worth when I was a kid. And that was no one's fault. That was just because I didn't know anything. So I would let people walk all over me, and I just, until I would hold it until I blew up. But I mean, just look at the evolution between you and I. Let's not even worry about my kids, but just you and I. There was years where we didn't talk, and that was not your doing. That was my doing because I was an asshole little kid. Not little, but I was an asshole kid who was just very prideful and had gone in the wrong direction. But now, we're on a podcast together. We talk almost every day.
right.
But that path brought us to this path. So it's hard to regret what happened. Now, sometimes I wish that it would never have happened like that, but that's what brought us here. So,
and that's
the fate of our life.
It's what made you understand who you are. And sometimes you have to go outside of that. Like I was in foster care, and so from the age of 2, I've been the protector. And when I got to be and then I went into the military, and then I became a cop in the military. So I was just like reinforcing all this things that I thought about myself.
Right.
And then when I got the kids, and then I had to protect them. And I would have fought a badger for you guys.
Oh yeah.
And
you almost fought a physical trainer for me.
And it wouldn't have been a problem. I'd have enjoyed it. But the process of me finally getting to know that I can let other people protect themselves, or they have the strength to do this, or in essence, the necessity to learn how to do it. And I don't have to be that hovering father, but I'll always be there for them. But that's how it worked with me.
Right.
And working in the spirit world and doing this stuff has helped me in a lot of ways, because I talk to the dead.
Right.
in more ways than one, but I do. I read books all the time. I learn from, and I don't agree with everything I read. It's not like I read a book and I'm like, oh, that's it. I'm like, yeah, I like that part. I don't like that part. And that's just how I am.
But that's one thing I don't like about our society. And this, I was thinking about this today, and I didn't know if I was going to be able to work it in. I was like, I'll work it in sometime. I wrote a note about it. But we get so much shoved in our face right now.
Mm-hmm.
Gobbledygook. None of it makes sense. None of it has anything to do with Bobby. I don't care about the right or the left or their interests that they're trying to shove down my throat. And we've talked about this is why we don't watch the news or TV,
Mm-hmm.
and there's no point in it. But I like what you said there, because it's not the problem that they have opposing ideas or that they're pushing these ideas. It's the problem that they won't listen to each other about
Mm-hmm.
opposing ideas. And not just as a human race, or not just as Americans, but as a human race, we have this wall up where, oh, you said something I don't agree with. I'm not going to talk to you.
Or look if there's a possibility that there's a different path than what either of us are taking,
right,
or looking at.
but so many people are looking to speak, but nobody's looking to inform. People are willing to hear, but they're not willing to listen. And this causes, I think, more separation than anything.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that Stoicism has kind of showed us, like you said, listen to the dead, because you can learn so much from a book. You can learn things that you don't agree with or that you don't align with, but you can still learn them. Being how we are now, it's just not very stoic as a people. But it's just getting to this point of where we can, to steal words from Poor Man's Poison, give and take. But it only works if everybody does it. Now, I'm not saying that, because this person is a right wing, I have to agree with them on something. Like, no, it doesn't, or left wing or whatever. But instead of screaming hatred at each other, how about we sit down and talk and listen? I don't know. Maybe I'm out of bounds.
No, it's the same. Like, what's funny is I've journaled for years now.
Right.
And I'll go back and look at my old journals and I'm like, wow, that's where you were.
Right.
But I had to be there to get to where I am now. I had to go through that path. And it's funny when you can look at yourself 10 years ago and have an argument and still be okay. Because there's a thing of, there's more value on being not even heard but seen than there is on how the society can work together.
Right.
And that's like we talked about the podcast. I'll post something that is scientific, proven, controversial on Facebook. I'll get 3 to 5 likes. If I posted a picture of a dog or a sunset, I'll get 80, 90 likes. Right? Because it makes people, our podcast will make people look inside. You have to look inside to figure out what you can do different if you want to.
Right.
And it's not an easy path, as you and I both know.
No, and it's probably one of the hardest things I've ever done. And not just looking inside of me, but being able to look inside of me and see that this isn't the person that I want to be. I need to change. And that's not something everybody, I think, is willing to do. To be able to say, hey, this isn't who I need to be, who I want to be. I need to change.
Yeah, and I had a conversation with a person not too long ago, and they said, what do you try to be perfect? And I said, no, I'm just trying to stay in motion. I just don't want to be stagnant.
Right.
And I think that's where depression will pick up with a lot of people, sadness.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not saying that I haven't had some depression and sadness in my life. I haven't, like, last 2 weeks I've been watching movies here and there, and I just crying like a baby because I have sadness that's releasing. It's not so that I'm crying at the movie as much as I'm just releasing sadness that's in there. And it's, then I'll laugh about it because, I'm like happy that it's happening. But it's kind of funny that I listen to the old narrative.
Right.
Like, guys don't cry. I better not see you cry. I'll give you a reason to cry if you cry. Well, apparently I already had one.
Yeah. I've had a lot of reasons. So you take all them beatings back.
Here's my list. This is a list of reasons I'm going to cry. But yeah, that's, my call to action would be to look at one thing in your life that you're not happy with, that you tolerate, that you can change. And it doesn't mean it's going to be easy.
Right.
But let me tell you, from our relationship that we have right now and the growth that it's having and going to have, wouldn't change anything for the world.
Me neither. My call to action is to share this fucking podcast, you pieces of... I probably shouldn't curse out our fans. All 7 of them. No, share the podcast, please.
We could have 14 by next week.
People will listen now. I'll just post that little clip. People will listen like, why is he cursing at all his listeners? This is ridiculous. Then they go through like, this is not... The rest of the podcast isn't like that. What's going on?
What's going on? These guys are talking about real stuff that's going to make me think. I don't want to do that.
But it's funny you said release. And this is just a little thing, then we'll end. The videos I put up of me crying, that was not me going, okay, I need to cry, hit record, make myself cry. I was literally eating my lunch and just thoughts of Havoc being up in up wherever he is and playing and being with Midas and Sasha and Wally and everybody just playing. And I just literally started weeping. Like I didn't really feel sad. I felt happiness, but I think it was just all the emotions. And Andrew Garfield said it best is it's all the unexpressed love that I never got because now he's gone. It's all the unexpressed love just came out of me and it was in tears. And I was like, well, this is not a cute moment for me, but I want to get this so I could because it felt like a release. After I was done, I just felt like calm and everything was going to be okay. And I was okay for the rest of the day. But I mean, it was just one of those things that like, I'm sure people are like watching it and like, oh, this idiot just made himself cry.
Right.
But first of all, I'm not that good of an actor. If I was, I'd be doing something else. But it was also, most of it was because I wanted to show people that being in a state where you're just bawling, crying, does not always mean that that you're in a bad place. It might be because of bad things, but it could just be you need a release. You need that to get out of your system, to express that emotion, to feel that, and then it'll feel better later.
Well said. Well said.
And just remember,
you are not broken and you're not alone. It's just us that are alone.